Thinking about launching a podcast but overwhelmed by all the moving parts? At TurnKey Podcast Productions, we take the hassle out of podcasting so you can focus on the talk, not the tech. From concept to launch, guest booking to post-production, we handle everything. Need a strategy to grow your show and turn guests into clients? Yep, we do that too. DIY or done for you, we've got the solution that fits. Whether you're just getting started or ready to scale, TurnKey is your behind-the-scenes podcast team. TurnKey Podcast Productions. Your voice, your message, fully produced. Learn more at turnkeypodcast.com/contact. That's turnkeypodcast.com/contact.
Here's what you can look forward to on this episode of The Nice Guys on Business.
One of the coolest projects I'm in the middle of now is training other psychologists, social workers, and counselors through continuing education programming to get credits for their license, teaching other professionals about rare disease. I'm leading an 8-module, year-long program to expose others because there aren't many of me around, and there are a lot more people who find themselves in these situations than there are professionals to help them. There's nothing that can replace 26 years taking care of my boy to equip me to do this work. But I'm looking for company and doing what I can to teach others as much as I can so that they can feel credible enough to serve this kind of community. So to answer your question, I don't think I would have, my career path would have been very different without my son and the challenges he faced.
You're pretty good at podcasting there, Doug and Strickland. And that's what I appreciates about you. Go from where you are now to where you could be. Get expert tips to grow your business, to be more productive and more efficient, whether you're trying to build influence, grow your community, or make it rain. Best-selling author of Nice Guys Finish First, Doug Sandler, can lead the way. The Nice Guys on Business is produced by TurnKey Podcast Productions. Now, here's your host, Doug Sandler.
Okay, nice guy community. Albert Freedman isn't just a psychologist in private practice. He's someone who understands the work from the inside out, serving individuals and families in more than 40 states. Al specializes in supporting those navigating rare diseases, disabilities, medically complex conditions. His work extends beyond his practice, consulting with advocacy organizations and biopharmaceutical companies and speaking globally on mental health and rare diseases. Al's perspective is deeply shaped by his son, Jack, who lived with spinal muscular atrophy, and I hope I pronounced all that right, for 26 years. This conversation is about empathy, resilience, and showing up for families when life can get a little bit complicated. Al, I'm excited to chat with you. Welcome to the Nice Guys on Business podcast.
Thanks for having me, Doug. I'm honored to be here.
Yeah, I'm happy to have you here. I forget how we even came connected to each other, but when I heard empathy, compassion, helping families, it didn't matter anything that happened before that. I was interested. Where's a good starting point for this conversation for you and me? Should we start maybe with your story of Jack, or should we start in another area? I want this to be good for you as well.
I think that's a good place to start because my son really has shaped my experience, both personally and professionally. Baby Jack, my first child, was born 30 years ago, healthy. And at his 6-month pediatrician appointment, the doctor noticed he wasn't sitting up or rolling over. And within a span of 4 days, we went from having a healthy 6-month-old baby to a baby who wasn't expected to live past the age of 2 with a diagnosis of a incurable muscle disease called spinal muscular atrophy. So as you can imagine, our lives flipped upside down. It was a very traumatic and disorienting experience to find ourselves in this what felt like an impossible parenting situation. Spinal muscular atrophy leads to muscle weakness, floppiness. And so in his life, Jack used a wheelchair and had a feeding tube and had a ventilator and a whole host of medical challenges. But thankfully, baby Jack didn't fully cooperate with the prognosis. He lived well past 2, and he was with us for 26 years.
Incredible.
And because, he accomplished a lot more than anyone ever expected him to, and made a real impact during the time he was here. And so my professional work as a psychologist, I was just finishing graduate school, having been a classroom teacher elementary school teacher in my younger 20s. I went back to school at 30 and got a PhD in psychology. I became a child psychologist. And just when I was finishing my degree, Jack was born. Fast forward 30 years, because of my experience taking care of my son and all that came with it, my attention has turned to focusing on the needs of other families, patients, parents, caregivers, of people who find themselves in similarly with complicated medical conditions and rare diseases. Because I've lived it, I know what it feels like, and I feel very privileged to help, and feel like Jack, although he's been gone 4 years, is on Dad's shoulder wherever Dad goes, and keeping Dad honest. And he's here with us today, with me as I speak to you. So the profound experience, very difficult, but I've come to see the gifts that my son brought to the world and gave to me during those years. And I feel very fortunate to have had him so long.
You mentioned a couple of words in there, fortunate and gifts. And I can only imagine as the dad myself of two healthy young adults, 29 and 32. I think about going back to that time when you were given that diagnosis at 6 months, and you're just worried about, is the needle going to hurt when they give your kid a vaccination or anything like that. And here you get this diagnosis. How long did it take you to realize, one, that he was going to outlive his prognosis, but secondly, to realize the gift that was given to you, the birth of your son Jack, with this unfortunate consequence that he had this condition? When did it really connect with you that this is not, while I'm going to miss my son at some point when he's no longer here, this is something that I'm really going to embrace as my calling, because you changed your entire path. It sounds, well, didn't change your entire path, but this changed your path as you were going along. So I'm just curious. I know I ask a lot in there, but I'm just curious.
Yeah,
Just give me your feedback on what I've just
sure,
talked about.
sure. No, thanks, Doug. To your first question, every birthday was a big birthday. When you're told your baby is going to live to the age of 2, then when you have that birthday party for age 2 and age 3 and age 4, it feels like a miracle that your child has beaten the odds. And in the beginning, this kind of diagnosis is very traumatic and disorienting. It didn't start out feeling like any sort of gift. I didn't use the word fortunate. I felt
Right.
blown away by the pain of the reality that I would outlive my child. It over a period of those 26 years, each step of the way, because Jack was happy, had a positive attitude, never complained about anything, drove his wheelchair around like he was the mayor of the town, and he brought out the best in everybody who crossed his path. Incrementally and over time, I started to see that his job while he was here was a unique and special job, being the mayor of his school, the mayor of the town, bringing out the best in everybody, bringing people together. This didn't happen quickly, but as each birthday passed, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, I began to realize that Jack wasn't cooperating with his prognosis. He
Right.
wasn't. He was happy, not complaining, and pushing forward with his life and accomplishing things at school and later in work. 3,000 Facebook friends, and typing 20 words a minute with his eye as the mouse, with a camera aiming at his eye. He started to do some things that no one ever expected him to do in an extraordinary way. So the feelings I have looking back didn't happen quickly. They emerged incrementally. Essentially, I followed my boy's lead. And as I look back 30 years later, I'm able to look back with no regrets and feel proud of our parenting of our son and what he was able to contribute during the time he was here. But it's a complicated emotional process for the families I serve, and it has been for me too. It's not an easy experience.
Right.
It's a complicated experience, but I feel very fortunate that I have come through the experience whole and able to look back at some of the gifts and the positive consequences of such an unfortunate medical situation.
I think about some of the parents that are dealing with kids, whether it's a rare condition like spinal muscular atrophy or a learning disability. A lot of parents want to be very protective of their child. You know, they want to surround them in a cocoon and not let them have them be exposed, because for kids, it can be a cruel world out there. You know, kids just speak there's no filter for kids many times. Did you find yourself wanting to be in a position to protect Jack, as many of our listeners, as parents, want to protect their children regardless of the condition? Tell me about that.
Well, ironically, and I'm a child psychologist, so I'm very familiar with learning disabilities, attention deficit disorder, and all kinds of other challenges children face who don't have a complicated rare disease. Ironically, because Jack was so profoundly physically disabled and it was visible to everybody when he drove that wheelchair in a room, it was easy to spot that there was a problem and that Jack was different. And so thankfully, I didn't feel the need to protect Jack because people treated him like the mayor. And ironically, a child with a learning disability, using that example, Doug, that's an invisible
Yeah.
condition.
Yeah.
And and other types of challenges that children face. Ironically, Jack was treated like the mayor, and I never felt like I needed to protect him in the ways that I understand that other kids bear the burden with other peers and in situations at school and in the playground and on the school bus. And
Yeah.
I deal with that. I've dealt with that and supported kids in my practice for years. So no, Jack was so profoundly physically limited that people treated him really well. Actually, I feel fortunate for that, and happy to send a picture you can post with the podcast so people can see what I'm talking about.
When Jack was born, you said it was about 30 years ago now, right? About 30 years ago.
Yes,
When Jack
yes,
was born, probably support was not as common a word in your environment with a son with that what he had as it is today. I'm hoping that you can shed some light on the support mechanisms that are available today that may not have been available to you when you were at the early stage
sure.
of that.
And I'm a part of a lot of those support mechanisms professionally now, but you're right. Um, when you find yourself in this unusual situation, one of the first things you do once you get your feet under you from the trauma of the change in your life is you look for other people who've experienced something similar.
Hmm.
And so I attended my first conference with families who had kids with SMA, and the conference was filled with research and medical and workshops about wheelchairs and ventilators and feeding tubes and nutrition and orthopedics. And it was all important stuff. You have to pay attention to the medical
Right.
first,
Right.
the attention to the emotional, psychological experience that you have with a medical condition like this and rare disease often lags behind
Correct.
for obvious reasons. And so I tell people when I give talks all the time that for 26 years, I myself, and I'm a psychologist, didn't have a whole lot of time to talk about how I felt because I was busy keeping my kid alive,
Yeah.
right? So there's a reason why things have lagged behind. What I've seen as a professional is that because of the pandemic, another example of a positive, unanticipated consequence,
Hmm.
a light has been shined in general on mental health in the world.
Hmm.
And that has uh, caught up with in our rare disease world, um, caught up with our cultures and our support groups. So now that same conference, for many years, I've facilitated support groups for our children. I've been the only one without a wheelchair in the room for many years, although we have treatments now. So some of the kids are walking into that room.
Wow.
And I've offered workshops within our own community and many other rare disease communities. I provide counseling support in groups with support groups online. Just returned from a 3-day retreat with 25 rare disease patients in Florida for them to have time with each other to talk about the experience in addition to attending to the medical issues. So there has been an emerging um, move towards more non-medical support side by side with the medical support for our people, our population, and many others in rare disease that I interact with around the world.
Now, I know that you would never label yourself this way, but you have got to be perceived as with the legacy of Jack on your shoulder, you've got to be perceived as a hero in the space, because not only as a professional are you helping people through support and through your practice, but you've also been there. You understand what it's all about. How much of a difference do you feel like that has made in your just in your world for yourself to be able to help other people, that are dealing with this? You say, I understand what you're going through, you do understand what people are going through.
Yeah, well, thank you. I don't uh, remotely consider myself any kind of hero, Doug. I think that we all as parents do for our kids what they need. Jack needed something different than most kids. You do for your kids what they need.
Hmm.
And if you had a kid like mine, you would do something to help him the way I've done something to help him. So I'm not the hero here. If anything, Jack himself is sort of the minister and I'm his messenger. But
Correct.
I think um, the communities I serve do consider me credible, not because I have a PhD in psychology. There are a lot of
Right.
people who have one of those, but
Right.
I'm immediately credible because I have had a similarly challenging experience. And ironically, now, yesterday, I facilitated a support group for a different rare disease community for parents who've lost a child. And there were 5 other parents on that
Mm.
Zoom, and I'm the facilitator, but
Yeah.
I feel very much a part of the group as much as the facilitator, and and I appreciate that other people seeing me as credible because of my experience and allowing me to not only be the professional but to be the guy who's been through it too. So we're all in this together is how I feel and what I share with the communities I serve.
I know, and I don't want you to take this wrong at all, because this is not at all a judgment. It just seems like this was a blessing. Jack was a blessing that was put in your life's journey, that without that lesson, as hard as it was, it may have been challenging to do what you do for a living. And it's I just feel that, and I'm not saying that in any negative or derogatory
No,
way at all.
I don't, just as I feel credible serving these communities because of my experience, Doug. I think if Jack had been a healthy child, I wouldn't I wouldn't feel credible serving these communities.
Mm.
And in fact, what I'm doing, one of the coolest projects I'm in the middle of now is training other psychologists, social workers, and counselors through continuing education programming to get credits for their license, teaching other professionals about rare disease. I'm leading an 8 module year-long
Incredible.
program to expose others because there aren't many of me around, and there are a
Right.
lot more people who find themselves in these situations than there are professionals to help them. There's nothing that can replace 26 years taking care of my boy to equip me to do this work. But I'm looking for company and doing what I can to teach others as much as I can so that they can feel credible enough to serve this kind of community. So to answer your question, I don't think I would have my career path would have been very different without my son and the challenges he faced.
While I'm sure there are a multitude of lessons that you have learned along the way, there are those in our audience that are looking for that key takeaway that might buoy their hope or their plans for the future. Is there anything that would rise to the top in terms of priorities of lessons that you have learned, or a specific lesson that you've learned along the way that might you might be able to impart to our community?
And adversity strengthens us. Um, we can learn a lot from people who are different than we are,
Hmm.
people who are different from we are, and who have limitations or disadvantages when they're trying to do the same things we're doing. deserve support and respect from all of us. We're all human beings doing the best we can, and some of us get dealt a different hand of cards than the rest of us. And so, what I've learned from my son is to never give up, to always be hopeful, never give up your hope, focus on what's possible rather than impossible, and be grateful for every day. I think probably the most important takeaway for me is that I learned at a much younger age than most people do to not take anything for granted and to be thankful for every day we're here on this earth ourselves and with our family members. And we got a crash course in perspective from my son every single day that he was with us, and I continued to. So I hope that helps as a few takeaways that I've experienced from having my boy.
Now, I know that your exposure to the podcast audience is not just through the Nice Guys on Business. You've had a chance to go on other podcasts before. What's the hope in sharing your message to audiences that are worldwide?
Well, Nice Guys, your population, your podcast, nice. I've seen a lot of business people, a lot of scientists who are doing good in the world. And an example of that for our communities is it takes a lot of time and money and effort to develop treatments to support small populations and expensive. And I've never taken a business course, Doug, but I've learned from consulting with executives at high levels in business settings that you have to make more money than you spend or you can't stay in business, right?
Pretty much.
So this is true whether you're developing a treatment for a rare disease or whether you are the president of a hospital or whether you are the president of the company that sends nurses to people's houses who need help at home, as we did. You have to make more money than you spend. But if you take care of the people, your business will follow. And I think that's what I've learned in the business context. If you do the right thing, the business will follow. And I know it sounds simple and it's more complicated than that, but I built my practice, which is a business, as a private practitioner on the premise that if I do the right thing for the person that I'm serving, then I'll be able to pay my bills later somehow, whether or not I make the most money from that conversation. So I'm grateful for business people who have the resources to support people who have fewer resources. And I've met a lot of people like you, Doug, who are business people who are also nice guys. These are not mutually exclusive. And it's a different world than the one I live in as a psychologist in the world that I work. But we're all in this together, and I'm grateful for everybody's contributions to help each other out.
Well, so appreciate you sharing Jack's story, sharing your inspiration behind what you do. For those in our listening community, our Nice Guy community, if you want to get more information on Al Freedman, all you got to do is go over to rarecounseling.com. We'll make sure we put a link in the show notes so that you have access to his business. And you'll see some other, of course, other important information in the show notes as well about how to reach Al or find more information about what he does. So Al, you've got the final word. Anything else that we want to share? Anything that I have not been asking you that you really wanted to make sure I made a point to share today?
I think we've covered a lot of ground quickly. I'm grateful for the time and getting to know you, Doug, and for the opportunity to share my story and to know that my son is still doing his part in making the world a better place. And thank you for having me.
Well done, Jack. Yeah, I know you're looking from your dad's shoulder. Right. So well done, Jack. And thanks, Al, for being on the show today.
Thank you for having me, Doug.
Hey, Nice Guy community, never underestimate the power of nice. Again, special thanks to Al Freedman. All of his information, including access to his website, will be right there in the show notes. Steve O'Brien, go ahead and take us out of here.
For the Nice Guys on Business, I'm Steve O'Brien. Don't underestimate the power of nice.